G'day YouTube. Warble's not a lot here. As you can see, we've got a clear blue sky. So I'll just have to take the camera with me as I go for a ride and see whether the supermarket's going to be open at Deepwater. Because at Deepwater supermarket, they have a particularly pleasant cup of soup, spring vegetable. Sort of a clear vegetable soup. They don't have it in the supermarket in town. Only way to get it is go to Deepwater, and why burn petrol when you can get there on an electric motorbike. Okay, camera on, straps variously tightened. Hopefully we should get a nice little ride to Deepwater. And the supermarket, there we go, may well be closed by the time I get there, because as with a lot of things these days, I took longer than I expected in order to get started, so therefore we're setting off a bit late. It's a Sunday afternoon. I don't know whether they shut at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock on a Sunday. Maybe I'm really behind times and they shut at midday. Doesn't really matter. As you can see, it's a bright blue day, so it doesn't matter how bright it is. Nothing above the horizon actually prints on film, and it just gives you that whole blue screen effect. So that the charge coupled device can take its time with responding to the light balance in order to maintain as near to perfect a colour balance as it can achieve. And this particular battery is battery number 1. It's on about its 83rd or something duty cycle, because it's been sitting in the shed in the box which the second battery came in, while the second battery has had its first 3 runs. So, clear blue sky, perfect day for getting a video on the bike, and I haven't got any spring vegetable cup of soup, so I might as well go to Deepwater on the bike. And if I get there too late, I still get a pleasant bike ride to Deepwater and back. At least that's the theory, if I don't make a mess of it. And as long as nothing else goes wrong. Remarkable what the traffic controllers bring home when they're doing traffic control around the people who are changing out the road signs, you know. Sometimes they see things that are being pulled out because they're being replaced by newer technology, and they're on the way to the dump. And there are better things to do with old metal than melt it down. There are people who might quite like sticking it up where it can be seen and made to comply with whatever the actual situation is on the day. You might even want to put it in such a place where it can act as a radiant heat shield and keep the pumps cool from... Whoopsie, we were going to go to Deepwater. There you go, that's what's called riding on autopilot. I want to go to Deepwater, but I don't want to turn into bloody carrion by the side of the road, so I'm not going to go there by the highway. That would not be a bright idea at all. It's bad enough when there's a best part of a metre between the unbroken lines defining the centre line, and when there's at least a metre between the fog line and the guardrail. There's at least 2 kilometres where such is not the case between Yarraford Road and Deepwater. There's less than half a metre between the fog line and the guardrail, and some moron has gone and put a rumble strip in that narrow little bit there, and there are lane marker reflectors on the fog line, and the double unbroken lines are only about 5 centimetres apart. So if I was on that bit of road as close to the edge of the road as I wanted to go, if there were 2 trucks trying to pass where I am, either they'd have to slow down from 100 to 50 to stay behind me, or the one coming the other way would have to agree to take the bloody guardrail on his side in order to miss the one passing me if he wanted to give me room to ride. So, no, this thing looks like it's a bloody trail bike. So when I want to go to Deepwater, it gets to ride on a dirt road. Half the way anyway. So, at this point in the time, 6 out of the 7 instalments in what I've been calling the Trumpocalypse Chronicles, that's that backburn my son put in 3 months ago. 30 metres of flame coming off that when he lit it up. Hadn't been burnt since before 1954. Knowing how much fuel was on the ground, how much of a flame height it put up there was why I was so hypersensitive about the spot fire on my own driveway. Same forest, same slope, same aspect, same wind conditions. So, last time I was talking about the ongoing Trumpocalypse, the state of play was such that I was forecasting an attempt to decapitate every US government department, based on the fact that 17 out of 69 or 67 inspectors general had just been fired, and the confirmation hearings for the clowns had started to go the way of the clowns. Well, that has in fact occurred, and not only but also it seems that the people who are doing Elon's bidding, because that's who's clearly in charge at the moment, I think of them as the Musqueteers or the muskrats, depending on the time of the day and the frame of the mind. They're doing really simplistically stupid things like forgetting to put bars across the back door to the computer program for their new dodgy doggy doge, not actually government department, Department of Government Efficiency. They're ranking up own goals at a phenomenal rate. At one stage there, Elon Musk claimed that $50 million worth of condoms had been sent to the Gaza Strip and that they were using the condoms to make bombs with. Now, I don't know what he got up to in his teenage years. When I was a teenager, I can remember attempts at bomb making and I can remember condoms, but the two never ever went together. Most young fellas, when I was a teenager, they carried condoms in their wallet, waiting for the condom to wear away from old age. Speaking of which, yes, One does in fact have the wallet in the back pocket. Worth checking when going hoping to find a supermarket open. So anyway, it turns out that these $50 million worth of condoms were not being sent to the Gaza Strip on the banks of the Mediterranean Ocean. The condoms were being sent to the province of Gaza in the nation of Mozambique, where there are 20 million people, and the idea is to put something between everybody chasing the sensation of slippery friction of mucous membranes and the possibility of catching human immune deficiency disease virus. And if there's 20 million people, I don't know what condoms cost these days. They were about $1 each. When I was a teenager, I used to buy them by the dozen box, take them back to the boarding school. Actually, no, they were 20 cents each, and I used to sell them for $1 each. What a naughty boy. All the little Catholic boys wanted to have one so that they, you know, would sort of look at it and think about it in the dark of the night. And none of them were brave enough to go into the chemist to buy them. The fella who had the next cubicle to mine in the year 12 rooms, he used to go home and try and make lead azide, the percussion sensitive, high explosive unstable compound. They use it in the primers in 22 rimfire rifle cartridges. And he used to pack that in the back of bloody air rifle pellets, put the pellets backwards in his air gun and shoot exploding ammunition at the local wildlife. So, yeah, condoms and bomb making can occur to the same sort of delinquent juvenile mind, but they don't really come together, you know. It's not like glass bottles and refined transport fuel and corks and bed sheets sort of thing, you know. Molotov cocktails, every teenager knows about them. So their wild propaganda doesn't make sense at many levels, and it's easily fact-checked. And the answer, when confronted with the falsity of the claims, was, oh, well, you know, you can't expect anybody to bat 1,000 out of 1,000. Sometimes you make a mistake. If we make a mistake, you know, tell us we've made a mistake and we'll have a go at correcting it. I don't know why, but at some point somebody convinced Elon Musk to get Trump to sign an executive order to ban fundraising by the Lutheran Church in America. Don't understand that one. As it were foretold within the prophecy, every FBI agent who participated in investigating anybody who was prosecuted in the January 6th insurrection and attempted coup, all of those FBI agents and administrators, they're all either being fired or investigated or prosecuted or combinations of the three. I think I mentioned last time the entire CIA got they got the fork in the road letter. You are invited to go home on full pay until September, and if you stick around, you won't get anywhere near as generous an offer next time. And this contract is not enforceable, and it may be altered at any time by the government. Several courts have put restraining orders and injunctions against Doge, Doggy, Dodgy, and Doge, Dodgy, Doggy has just appealed or ignored it because they say that, according to the Vice President, who's also basically said Ukraine can get used to being part of Russia again, and Europe is a bunch of arseholes because they locked up somebody for protesting an abortion too close to the clinic, and all he was doing was praying silently. According to Vice President Vance, whom Trump says is not fit to be his own successor, therefore he might not ever retire, according to Vance, the courts have no right to tell the President what to do. He claimed, to illuminate his thinking, that no judge would have the right to tell a district attorney what to do about any case. Well, you know, that happens every bloody day of the week in court. You know, judges look down sternly at the prosecutor and they say, no, we're going to rule this case out of order because of this, that or the other reason, and I find against you on these reasons for the other cases. That's exactly what judges are for. The entire theory of a democratic representative form of government is that the President gets elected by the people, the President appoints an administration that pleases the President, but all the appointees have to be confirmed or rejected by Congress. If the Congress says, no, we are the legislative branch and we can't work with that lunatic because their entire life story is dedicated to destroying the particular department you're trying to put them in charge of. We won't let you do that. Oh no, says Vance, the President can't do that. Yeah, but that's what the Constitution says the President's powers are limited to, and that's what the Constitution says the courts are supposed to be doing. Ah, says Vance. But Andrew Jackson once upon a time told the Supreme Court, well, you've made the judgment, you've made the decision, you've made your order, now go and enforce it. Now go and enforce it. And Vance thinks that's a clever idea to cite that because the court does not command any army or navy or air force or police force. The court relies on the Justice Department, which is a federal government department, and the Justice Department is part of the executive branch, which is run by secretaries appointed by the politicians. And part of the funny bit is that they've turned on its head the ancient principle that a new administration doesn't get to fire the entire civil service because otherwise you've got no continuity and experience of enforcing whatever branch of law or regulation they were supposed to administer. No, Trump's kicking out all sorts of people. A lot of them, people that he appointed in his first term because back then they were considered right-wing and conservative and therefore he was rewarding the side of politics that had put him into power. Now he knows he doesn't need another election. He can probably declare himself king for life because he's got absolute immunity from breaking the law, so it doesn't matter what the Constitution says he can do it if he wants to. And I'm sure that would feel pretty good fun for him, king for life. So the next stage in this, after due manipulation of the minds of the masses by Fox News Entertainment Corporation, is an increasing number of right-wing talking heads and commentators who are opining that, oh yes, well what Trump's doing is illegal, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over that because I approve of what he's doing in general. And the Republican-dominated Congress and Senate are not raising any kind of an obstacle. The only person who's consistently voted against the sillier parts of it is Mitch McConnell, for God's sake. The idiot who enabled it all. And the true high point of the week may in fact be the moment where Trump sat stony-faced, scowling and glowering at his desk, having said with his best shit-eating grin that we'll let Elon have a bit of a say. And lo and behold, another motor into the cyclist. All Cusvalis by name. And Elon brought his little 4-year-old human shield with him. What they would once upon a time have called a precocious little boy, about as articulate a spoiled brat as you can possibly expect or imagine, given the circumstances of his upbringing. And like a lot of 4-year-olds, he's in instant replay, record everything, replay it at various moments and see what sort of reaction you get to it to find out what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So while the 4-year-old is sort of not quite romping, but strolling around the Oval Office, picking his nose and wiping the snot on the Resolute desk, while Trumpy sort of sits under the glare of the cameras, and Elon hums and ahs and hovers and hesitates and scratches his bloody head and wonders what he'd like to say and can't quite think of the word. In the shattering silences, this little kid pipes up, looks at Trump, puts his fingers to his lips and goes, "Hush! Shut your mouth! You're not you're not the president, you need to go away." And then he said that, all of it, about 3 or 4 more times. And of course, Elon said nothing, and Trump scowled and looked away and didn't know what he could possibly say, so he couldn't acknowledge it either. And therefore the 4-year-old won the day. Nobody corrected him. He knows he can get away with that. So, yeah, Donald Trump, I don't know whether Musk sold or paid Putin for it, but Putin has certainly more or less relinquished control in some ways of what Trump's doing, although, Trump has appointed Hegsworth, and Hegsworth has gone over and made a fool of himself with NATO over Ukraine. Vance has gone to Europe and made a bigger fool of himself over Ukraine. And yeah, the real winner at the end of the week is a 4-year-old. And the really sad bit is that I can't actually fault Elon for taking his 4-year-old to the meeting. How many hundreds of videos have I made espousing the benefits of raising your kid the same way a kangaroo or a wallaby or a wallaroo raises their joey? You take it around with you in your work day as well as in your home life. You don't only spend time with your kid on the weekend. If you've got to go to the office at 5 o'clock in the morning, take your kid with you. I've taken a 5-year-old at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and be at my mate's place in time to drive to Armidale and put his friggin' aeroplane together and tow a hang glider in a howling gale, have a weekly break on the tow rope in front of 2,000 or 5,000 people, and be packing up the aeroplane having finished our day's actual work by 10 o'clock. Hasn't my didn't my 5-year-old grow up to have a big, savage, healthy dose of the work ethic? Took on a 15-year loan when he was 25 to buy the business where he did his apprenticeship. So, yeah, Elon taking his kid to work. Not actually a bad thing to do with a kid that age, because they're in data gathering mode at that point, and absolutely everything they see is going to get imprinted on them. And if this is what worked for daddy, then this is what the kid grows up learning and knowing how to do. However, on the flip side of that, Elon's managed to make a bloody great success of buying Vladimir Putin's American president puppet. $270 million, buys himself a president who lets him stick his computer hackers right through every computer in the US. Government, administration, federal agencies, departments, they're all fucked. The underlying concept is to fire every employee on a federal salary in order to save money under the Trojan horse of reducing the deficit. However, they're not actually going to reduce the deficit as in pay down any of the capital. They're merely trying to pay or service the interest. And meanwhile, they're planning on cutting tax for corporations and high-income individuals and making up any deficits with tariffs. So it's like insane economic voodoo, but apparently there's a bloke called Garson, and he's the philosopholiest to Elon and the tech bros, in the same way that Rosenberg was to the German Nazi Party. He was their philosopholiest, coming up with all these grand bloody theories about Aryan racial dominance and fated destiny of history and the eternal Jew and all the rest of that shit. And of course Elon's mother was a Nazi and his father's a bloody white supremacist incestuous arsehole. So yeah, I was listening to George Conway yapping on before I got on the bike actually. He was saying that there are basically 4 stages in a state capture coup by authoritarian tyrannical dictators, and America at the moment is squarely in the middle of stage 3. And that's where the judiciary is being demonised by the people who are conducting the coup. And every time Trump executively orders or must precipitously acts illegally, unconstitutionally, and they the people, because I can't say we the people because I'm not one of them, but when they the people then complain bitterly, vociferously, formally and officially, and the judges fairly and squarely apply the law and hand down an injunction, Trump and Elon and the MAGA-tards start baying for the judge to be impeached because he's an activist or she's an activist judge for daring to oppose the will of the God King Emperor Trump, as directed by his own puppeteer, Musk. So I think pretty soon there are 2 things that are going to be equally likely. On the one hand, if we regard Musk, the Musqueteers and the tech bros analogous to Himmler and the SS, and the old fat white MAGA-tards who've been welded on supporters of Trump for 10 years or more, they're like Ernst Röhm and the Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts. So those of you who've read a thing called a history book, you're going to be aware that what happened to Ernst Röhm and the brown shirts was the night of the long knives, and the SS effectively purged them from the party for being old-fashioned, and let it not be overlooked, for being homosexual. I don't think Elon and his tech bros take a particularly shiny view of anybody who's not a cis-normal white male, ideally a white supremacist male. Yakety poo, welcome to the corrugations. What about over here? Yeah, that's a bit better. In some parts of the corner. It will be better when this thing gets its new front forks, which is a bit of a saga. Get it out of the way. This thing's got forks that are only rated for 60 kilometres an hour because it's a road registered bike, and it's got the homologation on the computer that only lets it do 45 kilometres an hour. I mean, it will do 50 or 49, but only on more than 80% of the battery. Like it is now. Click. Um, the off-road version of this, it doesn't have blinker lights and hasn't got brake lights and hasn't got a big shiny headlight with 2 LEDs in it, hasn't got any wing mirrors, hasn't got the homologation, therefore its motor gets access to a full 6,000 watts worth of twistiness instead of the 3,000 this one gets. So it's got basically half the range and it'll go 75 kilometres an hour in still air on a flat road. So its shock struts on the front fork will only cope with 85 kilometres an hour, and the next model up has an 8,000 watt motor, and instead of 2.3 kilowatt hour battery, I think it has a 3 or 3.2 kilowatt hour battery. And it will do 85 kilometres an hour, so I think it has front forks rated to 100. So this has got the lightest set of forks that you can have, and after the very first time I took it on this road, I got an oil leak under the seal on the right hand one. And there's been an enormously long saga looking for new oil seals to be fitted, involving conservatively 8 trips to the motorbike shop for half a day while things didn't work out. And eventually the decision was made to purchase a new fork because they were thought were only going to cost about $350, but that was for a fork for a totally different bike. More like a glorified bicycle with no pedals. And the actual fork for this one, i.e. the super lightweight one, you'd have to wait for that to come from Hong Kong. The fork they've got that's on the shelf, I don't know whether it's for the off-road version of this or whether it's for the off-road big motor version of this. But anyway, getting it here is going to be $1,250, which I have paid, and that purchase has pretty much cleaned up the money I was going to throw at the new 60-volt chainsaw that DeWalt manufactures and sells, but they only sell it in America. So I hear at the moment. I did go chasing it, and that's what the shop that sells DeWalt in town told me. However, a bloke who has a couple of $1,000 worth of DeWalt power tools, he reckons that he was going to buy the exact chainsaw I'm thinking of in Brisbane, but he reckoned it was a 54 volt version, and the 54 volt version I've seen is a totally different saw, not suitable for what I want it to do. Right, so that's the fork excursion. I think I was talking about how I'm expecting the night of the long knives between the old established Macatard faithful who respect the rule of law and the Constitution and the role of the courts to adjudicate between the executive and the legislative branch, and to keep both the legislators and the executives to the terms of the Constitution. In fact, that's what the Supreme Court's supposed to do. It's supposed to interpret any disagreements over the meaning of the wording of the Constitution. And as people used to famously say in American law schools, or at least we were taught about it in Australia, the US Constitution means whatever the US Supreme Court says it means. Well, owing to the workings of an outfit called the Federalist Society, which has been stacking the US courts with right-wing conservative Christian nationalists for at least 50 years, maybe 100. And the Heritage Foundation, which is the outfit that commissioned the writing of the Project 2025 game plan. There are 6 super ultra conservative judges on the Supreme Court whose major priority was to repeal Roe versus Wade and stop abortions in the US, particularly abortions that are funded by the government or conducted at government hospitals. I don't know why they want the penalty for an unwanted pregnancy to include %50 maternal death rate and 25% infertility with the survivors. I mean, I am aware of the logic that they apply, but I object to the idea that they do so in the name of any competent, benevolent, fair, just, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, universal creator God theory. They've got a pseudo-logic, and I don't like it. So I'm not even going to friggin' well enunciate it, I'm just going to say their logic sucks. I much more fall along the line to support the people who say that abortion is a bad idea. If you're prepared to put the work in, then within 3 to 6 years you can be having a cup of coffee over breakfast, discussing the morning news on the radio with an independent thinking being who thinks that you know everything when the sun, moon and stars shine out of your arsehole, and you have to keep telling them when you don't actually know what the answer is to the questions they're asking. It can be a very, very rewarding and gratifying task to take on, trying to live up to the responsibilities of the moment of discovering that a couple have become pregnant. So yeah, I'm not advocating for abortion. I do, however, recognise that those grim statistics are what used to go on when I was a kid in primary school, and there were people who thought that was an unfair way to run the world, so they used to operate illegal clinics at risk of going to jail, and some of them were clean and some of them were unclean, and some of the people knew what they were doing and some of them didn't. And in some places, like my hometown, if a girl's parents were rich, then she got admitted to the local hospital as a private patient for either a dilation curette because she had irregular periods, or for an appendectomy, and she got a termination while she was anaesthetised. But it took money to achieve that. There were other people providing less clean and antiseptic and aseptic surgically effective procedures, and they used to carve a swathe of destruction. So in most places in the world during the 1970s, various societies decided that a much cleverer way of dealing with it would be to allow, with medical oversight, the performance of such procedures by people who were qualified and who took the moral position that they would rather see such procedures available in a clean and competent manner, so that people weren't going to be killing themselves in backyards with coat hangers. Or not quite killing themselves on the day, but then coming in a week later with septic shock from the dirty instruments and conditions and their own lack of knowledge. But that was the particular hill the American evangelical alleged Christians chose to fight on. And the way they did it was by stacking the Supreme Court and then bringing a case in front of the stacked court and overturning literally like 50 years worth of precedent, or 40 years worth of precedent. And that meant two of them had to lie at their confirmation hearings. Tony Barrett and the bloke who sticks beer up his arse. They both said that Roe versus Wade was established precedent and that they wouldn't do anything to change it. And then both of them voted to overturn it. But the big thing appears to be that Donald Trump, Elon Musk and the people who are angling for a tyrannical dictatorial regime in the US in order to make life more profitable for corporations and shareholders, the really big thing is that the entire purpose of having a government and a civilisation and laws is to prevent the poor from eating the rich. I fail to comprehend where they think they're going to go after they win power. They're going to be like the dog that caught the bus. And after they catch the bus and start biting the back tyre, it might start to move into reverse and run clear over the top of it. But they don't appear to recognise the principle whereby any leader, although they can claim credit for whatever pleasure and happiness and good things their decision making and leadership brings to their people, as a downstream consequence of the changes they have made, every leader is also ultimately personally, spiritually, morally, ethically responsible for all the pain and suffering and shit and misery that flow as a downstream consequence of all of their decisions. Unless you're an extreme, ultra-radical accelerationist who takes the point of view that the environment is in such dire straits that the only thing that's going to be useful is to completely cull humanity, shut it down in order to stop the continued emission of fossil carbon into the atmosphere, and therefore it doesn't matter who gets hurt, how much, or who delivers the message. There just isn't any comprehensible reason for a government to be doing what Trump and Musk are carrying out. I heard this morning that the idea is after he shuts down all of these government departments, Musk is prepared to tolerate the idea that he might have to re-employ one person for every 4 that he's firing at the moment. So he thinks that he's going to be able to restart entire necessary government departments and bureaucracies on 1/4 of the staff who used to be there after he does a complete emergency stop and tells them all to piss off that they're not necessary, slanders and libels and defames them and says that they're criminals who are scamming the system. He was claiming that there are people who are 150 years old in the social security system. A couple of days after he made that comment, somebody pointed out that if he was old enough to know as much about computers as he likes to pretend, he might remember that in COBOL, one of the Stone Age computer programming languages, if you didn't know what a date was, it defaulted to 1857. So if one bureaucrat at some time, say in the 1970s or 80s or 90s, did not know the birth date of any other individual being entered into the records, they entered 1857 as their birth date, as a coded warning to anybody who comes afterwards that this information is dodgy, you better look it up and establish it some other way. Elon and his barely out of adolescent dickheads didn't know any of that. Not a clue. They saw 1857 a couple of times in there, and they thought that these were people who were claiming to be 150 years old. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and Elon's in the role of the sorcerer's apprentice. He knows not what he does, and he's fucking doing it anyway because he thinks that's the way to make the world a better place, move fast, break things. It's what he's into. My grave misgiving stems from the fact that I don't know that anybody has any clear idea how anybody is supposed to stop a collapse. Once you start civilisation disappearing up its own arsehole because nobody's got any faith in the police or the judiciary, the prosecutors and the investigators and the CIA and the FBI have all been fired. Somebody who was put on the FBI watch list and was one step away from a no-fly list for their known association with declared terrorist leaders and their known habits of parroting Kremlin talking points, is now in charge of national intelligence. Tulsi of the Gababard variety. It's just mind-boggling. I don't know how fast Australia and New Zealand and Canada and Britain can get out of the Five Eyes, but we absolutely bloody need to. Oops, that place is open. At the super end of its market. Yeah, I think America might be completely, all overdone, bar gone. I think by the time they decide to do anything, and by the way, let's, flag the date, April the 19th, it's the anniversary of the Battle of Concord and Lexington, and that, Sonny Jim, can't see anybody at the supermarket. I think I've missed it. We'll see. God knows I'm even actually lawful to park here. Yeah, I think America's had it. I don't see how they can come back from this. I think too much damage is being done too fast. And I think by the time they decide that they're going to revolt, and as I said, I think the revolt is probably going to come to a head and they'll be shooting at each other by April the 19th in honour of the anniversary of the Battle of Concord and Lexington, when the American population revolted against their king, because that's what they got at the moment. And the king's name is Elon, and Elon is about to stage the Night of the Long Knives. And that's what I think's going on in the autarky of MAGA Musquetonia. That there then is episode 7, installment 7 in the Trumpocalypse Chronicles. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Let's hope I'm wrong. Ciao. And as you would have it, The trip was not, in fact, wasted because the supermarket was open and I got what I wanted to get. I suppose for the circular narrative, perhaps the narrative circularity. As you can see, it's not perfectly unblemished, and I had to cut the locks off. But look at what I got as a gift. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Happy Trumpocalypse. Ciao. Some old road signs, they get cherished, but they get chopped up. The scraps get cherished even, but some scrap grade road signs are just too good to chop them up, no matter how cunning or useful. The trick is that you want to put them to. Complete with 5 different pre-printed messages, as well as the blank cover plate. Somebody spent a lot of money on it. Might as well get some fun out of it. Isn't that right? You don't run away from me, do you, eh? You're not silly. Ciao.